invite you to come in the third round of discussion, and then we'll share out, and then we'll have a very short celebration before we leave.
Start again saying this is
He wants me to start over.
just not exactly.
Ditto. No, this is a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Peace Education Commission of the International Peace Research Association. And we are looking to the future for peace education globally. And our panel is myself, Candice Carter, Manisha, Bajaj, Edward Grantmeyer, Hakeem Williams, and Tony Jenkins. And they will introduce themselves, so I'm not going to elaborate. So I'm now going to give this to Hakeem to start us off.
Welcome to Cairo, the island. As we look to the future, let us take a moment to recognize the historical and contemporary relationship between indigenous peoples and the land, and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of these islands. We stand on the lands of the Kalinas, Tainos, Rao, Napuyo, Yao, Lokono, Shabayo, and Chavanis. This week, as we have gone forth in pursuit of peace and justice, we've tried to remember the ancestors who survived the violence of colonization, slavery, discrimination, exclusion, and erasure. Let us remember the indigenous ways of knowing, of survival, of resistances. Let us remember that their children are still here, alive and strong. The land provides and protects. The land has memory. We recognize the importance of the land in understanding and addressing violence and injustice in our communities. This is a land acknowledgement statement read at the beginning of the opening ceremony, and it's so fitting that we repeat it here on the tail end. Thank you.
Why don't you just start down there? Tony, just introduce yourself over this one.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Good morning, everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Tony Jenkins, and as many of you know, I think of myself as a steward of two global initiatives in peace education, both established in part by one of the Peace Education Commission founders, Betty Reardon. And so I represent the International Institute on Peace Education and the Global Campaign for Peace Education.
Hakeem Williams, born and raised in Trinidad, lived in the United States 25 years now. I still hate winter. And coordinator of this conference with Matt Meyer. It's good to see you here for this closing session.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Manisha Bajaj, she, hers. I'm from California. I'm a professor at the University of San Francisco. I was previously a professor for 9 years at Teachers College, Columbia University, where I was the coordinator of the Peace Education concentration. At USF, I direct the Human Rights Education Masters and the doctoral concentration, as well as teach courses on peace education, and have been doing research, practitioner work, educational work, engaged collaborative work in the field for over 2 decades.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. Thank you. My name is Ed Bramar, and I'm a professor in the Learning Technology and Leadership Education Department at James Madison University in the United States. It's situated about 2 hours south of Washington, D.C. I'm also the editor of the Journal of Peace Education.
Good morning again, everybody. I'm Candice Carter. I'm from the USA. I'm a new grandmother. That's my favorite title right now. I'm the facilitator of the Peace Education Commission at this conference. Why don't you go next, Ed, and then we'll pass it down to Tony, if that's okay.
So we wanted to start today by sharing a special message with you from one of the founding members of the Peace Education Commission, Dr. Betty Reardon. Many of you know her and know her work, and she's very, of course, dear and near to all of us. Actually, on this panel, the three of four of us were mentored by and taught by Betty at some point in our careers, as many of you in the room today. Unfortunately, Betty is turning 94, not unfortunately, wow, amazingly, she's turning 94 in about a month's time. but her body can't be here. Her heart really is, and she could be here today. This is the message she would share, so she shared this with me to be read with you. I want to congratulate the organizers of this panel for acknowledging the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Peace Education Commission of IPRA. And as well, congratulate you on your individual efforts to make education a significant instrument of peace in this generation. And regarding those efforts, let me share with you some of the learnings from my experience in trying to do the same, and some of my concerns about the future. I wish you courage and tenacity as you go forth as the formulators of the next generation. Well, you are this generation, you are also the teachers and researchers that will formulate those that come after you. In that sense, you are the future of peace education. This message is being drafted to you on the eve of Earth Day, and the Earth and its future are one of the main concerns I wish to emphasize as significant to the future of peace education. 50 years ago, the fate of the Earth was not a major issue for the public or for peace education. We did have Richard Falk's book, The Endangered Planet, and we knew that ecological balance was a significant part of the peace paradigm, but we did not understand, as we do now, that unless we address climate change as a major concern for the future, none of the other issues will have real significance. I emphasize this because having a shared major overarching concern was the element that held together the first members of the Peace Education Commission as a unified team, confronting what we saw to be the major global issues of justice that was impacting the well-being of all human society, the unjust economic structures that cause excessive and constant suffering to so many of the human family. We were a group of educators and activists from all parts of the earth who had deliberately sought out such a collaborative group. We believed that IPRA was such a network that could provide a foundation for our community of educator activists. From every continent, we were various in the ways we did education, but we were all committed to education as an instrument of peace. We sought to be part of what we saw as a growing global community, and believed that the future of the earth depended upon collaboration within that community seeking a peaceful, just, and nonviolent future. We were a global community of reflective analysts on what were the threats to peace and what were the forms of violence that education might address. As we were concerned with the structural issues that were rooted in colonialism, we stressed reflective diagnostic analysis, dialogue, and conceptualizing alternatives. I believe that decolonizing education is still much the same problem that we looked at through the lens of Robin Burns from Australia, who had strong identification with the Indigenous people movement and brought a very different perspective to that of an ordinary Australian. Robin worked with Robert Aspslaw, who had, as a child, an experience of being in a Japanese prison camp, and subsequently the experience of a very close working friendship with a Japanese peace educator. Robin and Robert circulated a significant paper on the violence of knowledge that resulted from the official school curricula that most Western countries, and at that time being extended to much of the former colonial world. It is these very conditions that you still must confront, which were our major concern. These are among the particular individuals who built the foundations of international peace education. I was through our Japanese friend and colleague, Hisoka Ukita, an active member of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, that we came to focus also on the work of Paulo Freire that reinforced and enriched the dialogic methods that we favored for our teaching and our own inquiries. We were a community of acquirers and activists, and in both worlds we addressed the effect of that oppressive colonial system on the minds and on the human formation of the learners in the schools of the world. I see as a similar problem the effects of the possibility that an unsustainable earth could have on the minds of learners today, and I hope that we will take this into consideration as you go forth into this next period of the development of the field. We were also readers of Fanon, and we knew of the phenomenon of the internalization of the oppressor. I fear that the present generation has internalized the possibility of no future, not only because of potential planetary collapse, but also living with the threat of nuclear weapons. And I urge you to address the challenge that that this internalization presents to you as peace educators. In a longer piece, which will be posted soon in the future in the Global Campaign for Peace Education website, I will describe more of those who constituted this first global community of peace educators through PEC and the substance of our work. We hope as well to be able to post proposals for forms of peace education that will address the present existential crises produced by climate change, the potential of nuclear annihilation, and the growing authoritarianism that produces these threats. You certainly need not repeat what we did. My hope is that you will adapt your own pedagogy, assuring that peace education is a significant instrument for turning around the major threats to the earth and humanity. I wish you the same professional satisfaction from communal engagement with these problems as we had in those early days. Even more, I wish you the joy and deep learning of being part of such a community. Love, Betty.
Thank you, Tony. So I want to re-quote Betty, "You are the future of peace education." Right? We are the future of peace education. That's heavy, that's wonderful, full of opportunity, full of responsibility. And I asked to take a moment to remember mentors, right? So I'm thinking in particular, when I got into the field of peace education in early 2000, I was an organic intellectual. I'd never taken a course on peace education. I reached out to Benny Reardon and Ian Harris and said, how do I do this? Where do I learn? What do I read? Where do I go? And both of them responded immediately with a nice long list of readings and opportunities for conferences and different ways to connect. And that's how I taught myself about the field of peace education. In particular, Ian Harris invited me to Milwaukee, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and we went out for lunch, went to his house. I got hair on my shirt from his dog as I sat in the back seat of his car. And we did that several times at different conferences, et cetera, et cetera. Ian Harris, for me, was the mentor that invited me in and took the time and inspired me to continue to learn more about the field of peace education and eventually contribute to the field of peace education. And Ian Harris passed away this past Monday. And he passed away in California, where he had retired to. And I won't get into his biography, all of that. It's in the obituary in the Milwaukee Sentinel, so if you want to read more on that. But the spirit of it here is about mentorship, right? People who have impacted us deeply. So how many people in this room know Betty Reardon personally? How many have read her work? How many people know Ian Harris personally? How many people have read his work? Good. Okay, so we understand that we are stewards of that knowledge, right? We're stewards of that mentorship. I invite us for 30 seconds here in a moment of silence to bring into the room the mentors, the spirits of the mentors who have impacted you deeply, right? The people who you have a relationship with and whose work you want to carry on and carry forward as a form of living memory. Right? So they could be with us or not with us. So let's just do that for 30 seconds. And thank you.
And now we're going to go into the first round of our panel discussion, and here is their prompt. As I said earlier, some of you have just been able to join us. We're going to have 3 rounds of discussion, very brief discussion. And the first two panelists will do it, and we'll invite you to participate in the third round in small groups. Okay, so we're just going to start with Ed right here. Is that okay?
And let's go back, start over.
So the question was challenges and how we've sought to overcome them.
It's posted, yes. You want to read it?
That's okay. I think folks can read it. Well, I will just pick up on what's already been said and just kind of calling in our intellectual ancestors, living and departed, into the room to think about how we situate ourselves in the field, because it relates to a challenge that I want to raise, which is a bit of the, on one hand, seeing the field of peace education and with a sort of one-way direction and a one-way street, and sort of the inheritance of sort of previous visions of the field. I think we really need to constantly think and renew and not analyze what the current moment is. When I look at the statement that Betty Reardon and Magnus Halsrud wrote about, they wrote a piece last year looking back on 50 years of the founding of the commission. It is a radical statement of a vision for the future. It is anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, thinking in the 1970s about nations that were still colonized, and decolonization movements still taking hold in different parts of the country, nuclear disarmament, eradicating patriarchy. That statement is a radical vision of its time. And I think we need to kind of think about what is a radical vision of this time right now. And what we often have in academic fields is sort of, feeling like we have to inherit and keep things the same. And I think it can, on one hand, lead to stagnation, but also it can prohibit us from having these renewals and growth that we need to keep developing the field. So when we talk about mentorship, I think sometimes it's a street signs approach. Go this way, go that way, and this is the way it has to be. And I want to encourage us to kind of draw on our intellectual ancestors, Paulo Freire, Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, really think about these radical visions for where we want to go, and think about mentorship as lanterns, illuminating a path, but that there are multiple directions and there's no designated outcome. We're building it, we're making the road as we walk, as Paulo Freire and Miles Horton said. And I want to just also say that I think some of this approach has also led to a co-optation of the field. That when we think about the neoliberalism, liberalization of higher education, people who come to study peace education and are perhaps taking on $70,000 to $100,000 in debt to get a degree in this field, sometimes those conditions can inhibit the radical directions that one might take, and our linkages to social movements, to organic intellectuals on the ground, to work that's happening because of the need to pay back loans or engage in a certain type of praxis that allows one to live in those conditions. So when we think about higher ed, there's a privileging of that space in the field and the scholarship coming out of that, but how do we also acknowledge the organic scholarship that's coming from social movements, from organizations, from people who don't have access, and getting more access to people who can bring that vision into the academic space, into the scholarship, into the journal articles, into the publishing, because so much of it is dominated by scholars from the global north who have access to the means of production. So I think I want to just mention that, where I am at the University of San Francisco, our department was founded by close colleagues of Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire sat on the first dissertations of our doctoral students. You've seen many doctoral students and master's students who are here just imbibing some of those, the praxis, and not just the unidirectional way that I think we sometimes are conditioned to believe we have to go in a field. So really thinking, how do we build? How do we constantly renew, regrow, rethink in every moment, given the conditions that we're facing? And I think Betty's statement really called on us to do that as well.
Thank you. Good morning again. So one challenge, I'll try to stick to one because there are indeed many. I wanted to be a psychologist initially when I left Trinidad, so psych was my major, and then I got to my senior year. And I don't know how it came up, but I was sharing my own vision of being a therapist with my professor. And I said, yeah, I'll be on the couch with the person, I'm gonna be crying together and hugging and commiserating. And she's like, no. She's like, no, you can't do that. She said, you'll be burnt out like within a few months. And I'm like, okay, so this field is not for me, bye. It's unfortunate because now I understand that there is a multiplicity of strands within psychology, and I wish I knew that then. I only knew this rather rigid, uber-Western form of psychology, and I was like, I don't want that. But now there's so many types, and so maybe one day I'll return to that. However, there was an early crisis because I was like, I can't get therapists, what will I do? And I was running after-school programs in New York City and reading works of Mandela and Gandhi at that time. And one day I put the word education and peace in a search engine. It wasn't Google, so I'm dating myself a bit. And the peace education program at Columbia came up. I read the description and I said, oh my goodness, this is me. This is me. And so I applied and I got in and did the master's, and it took me 4 attempts to get into the doctoral program eventually, and Monisha took me under her wings, and the rest is history, as they say. Then, and it's still the case now, that peace education means many things for many people. And I think it still struggles to have a particular kind of disciplinary cohesion. I am not that committed to intervening in that particular challenge, but I do think it's a challenge for folks who are trying to find the field, because it's happening around the world under diverse nomenclature. And I do think maybe some kind of research assemblage of all of that ritual, some kind of repository somewhere is important for the field. I'm not interested in that project because despite the nomenclature, if you're doing that exciting work, if you are impacting people's lives, ultimately that is what matters. But I am in the field, and so I do think there is some need to pay attention to that. Now, what am I doing to overcome that? In a very kind of subsidiary way, I am focusing on decolonial interventions in the field. Decoloniality is the sexy term now, and it's disgusting. Like, what does it mean anymore? And when I press people asking, why are you in this field? Why are you in this village in Africa? You're from Cincinnati. Why are you here doing this work? They're empty answers. And so I'm still perturbed by that. People who write about the South and they've never been. So what I am doing is that I am doing the best I can at Gettysburg College to use our massive resources for reparations with the youth I work here in Trinidad. And I work with poor youth from similar backgrounds to myself. And so I take the coins from Gettysburg College and I pamper the students here. I do work with, I get paid to do restorative circle work around the world. But in Trinidad, I'm like, no, you're not going to pay for this. This is a gift. And so I will take any monies I can from any part of the global north to do the exciting work here in Trinidad, to build capacities, to show kids possibility, to challenge this space, and then obviously to challenge the world, because Trinidad does not exist in isolation. And the way I try to do my work and try to live my life, as imperfect as it may be, is to have interrelations that reflect the systemic all the way to the intrapersonal. And so in my classroom, I share about my own journey in therapy to process my trauma from growing up in this space, and of course trauma from living in the United States. And that's the interpersonal, so I share that with them. But then also I'm doing capacity building work across North America in trying to foster peace and justice critical leadership among undergraduates primarily. And so I'm trying to model to my students sort of prefigurative praxis from the systemic to the interpersonal. And so that is the way I am trying to intervene around this particular challenge. Thank you.
I want to name a big challenge, one that we've certainly not overcome, one that I'm probably still a big part of the problem, and that's the patriarchy. All right, and if I can get biblical for a moment, patriarchy, it has been weighed, it has been found, it's been measured, and it has been found wanting, right? We all understand, of course, how patriarchy has been judged unfit for human and planetary survival. We talk a lot about that in this space. The reason I share this is it's part of the origin story of this commission, right? So it was the early feminist researchers who in particular, and educators who in particular found solidarity in the space of the Peace Education Commission. And in that space, were able to challenge some of the patriarchal assumptions that limited our thinking, that limited our strategies and the possibilities for peace, right? So they brought, in particular through the commission, new structural gendered analysis, and they understood that without that, we would be unsuccessful to create change, right? They brought attention to the relational dimensions of peace, those kind of considerations that were largely considered inferior women's concerns or inferior concerns of educators into this space. And in doing so, they helped broaden the scope of the field of peace research. They saw and articulated the interconnections between the personal and the political, which we talked a lot about this week. They began to articulate the importance of holism as a central pedagogical principle to peace education, right? Understanding that the personal and the political, they are essentially inseparable, and how essential this understanding was to the possibilities of nurturing political agency, right? These relational dimensions also help us open up in this space an awareness of the ecological dimensions of peace and our interdependence with the earth. The feminist peace educators also helped us to center our thinking about security on the quotidian, the day-to-day lived experiences of people, calling for us to make a shift from these national security paradigms to human security paradigms, which we're still working towards and struggling towards today. They also helped us to see that educational knowledge was as important as the knowledge that was generated in the research community, right? And what most important to me is that they pursued this very political task as educators. They didn't use the blunt instruments of patriarchy to achieve those political ends, but they used the more nurturing instruments of inquiry, the instruments of imagination, the instruments of care, and found ways to encounter those whose views they opposed with dignity. And so I wanted to share that. This isn't my project, this is all our project, we're also working on that. To me, that history of the Peace Ed Commission needs to be something that we share.
Thanks. I'm not sure if I'm adding anything new, but maybe seeing it a little bit differently, really. And challenge legitimacy in the academy. When I first started in the field of peace education at Indiana University, where I did my dissertation, there were 2 dissertations on peace education. No, one, I'm sorry, I was the second. There was one done in 1992 and another done in 2005, and that was my dissertation focused on peace education. And I used Columbia University, the Peace Education Center, their Betty Rubin's work and Harris's work, and particularly the Journal of Peace Education. I knew it was coming out, it was coming because I had lunch with Ian Harris in 2003 or 2002, and he said, hey, there's this journal that's coming that you could potentially publish your work in someday. And I thought, well, this is really important because convincing my dissertation committee who were very supportive of the work, but particularly clueless about the field of peace education. I needed to really convince them that important people at important places were doing this work, and that if we wanted to be important at Indiana University, we also needed to follow the way of Columbia University, Betty Rubin, University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, UC Berkeley, and the Kroc Institute at Notre Dame. These are important places, and it helps with us. It helps with who we are to be in communion with those groups and those people. So for me, a challenge historically has been legitimation of the field of peace education, and in particular publication venues and avenues in order to get the word out. So we were also asked to talk about, well, how have you worked to overcome it? Personally, just getting on board with other people doing work in the field. Jane Lynn reached out to me alongside Ian Harris in 2005, 2006, and we launched, I believe, the first book series in peace education, right, with Information Age Publishing. So we put out calls for proposals, and and we have 14 volumes in 10 years. After 10 years, I retired from that particular position because it was a lot of work and a lot of unseen labor, and I was a junior faculty member who wasn't really getting credit and was even urged to get out so that you can work on your own scholarship. So I was doing too much service work is what I was told. And so we handed that book series off. I'm happy to know that there's another book series on human rights and peace education, Maria and also Monisha, with Bloomsbury. It's awesome to see that, and I'm sure you'll take it in wonderful ways and wonderful directions. The other bit is the Journal of Peace Education, right? It is a place where we publish work, research on peace education, and since becoming the editor 1.5 years ago, alongside board members that have advocated for equity, justice, and access in the journal through a special collection. And we are also thinking about ways of engaging diverse authors from underrepresented regions of the world so that the spirit of that journal lives on, the spirit that John Sinnott, Ginny Long wanted, which is to create an avenue, particularly for people from the global south, to share their stories about peace education research, right? So that's kind of the work that we're doing right now, and you can get those articles online free, open access. We're trying to push the journal to be open access, but Taylor and Francis needs to get its money to be a publisher, right? So we're figuring out ways, in creative ways. One of these creative ways is a special collection. So download the articles, use them in your classes, and that. So that's what I have to say.
Very good. That was round one, and I'm realizing that we're a little behind schedule, and I don't think anything good happens in a rush. So what I'm asking permission to do here is just move to round 3 so we can include you, and we will join you in small groups.
There's a couple more points I would just make like very short before we go to.
Yeah, because we need to move very quickly. Okay.
Maybe a minute each.
I just wanted to build on what Ed was saying, which is in terms of sort of like stock taking of the present. And I think what I'm heartened by in terms of what I see here at this conference and sort of 50 years on of the Peace Education Commission is the journals, the book series, the avenues for this to become a legitimate field. But what I think we need to do also is de-silo the field, because I think what happens is in Western academia that everybody kind of stakes a claim in a particular turf, but there's so many dialogues and overlaps between human rights education, peace education, critical pedagogy, ethnic studies, racial justice efforts, and when we just stay in our silos, we don't learn from and we don't contribute to the larger conversation. So I'm gonna call for a stock taking and de-siloing as we move forward. And I just wanna say in this program, I think having Hakeem Williams, Maria Jose Bermeo on the program committee, I did a little analysis of the program last night, and I found over 40% of the workshops, panels, etc., were specifically about education. 40% of this conference is explicitly about education, and nearly every single panel in this entire workshop, plenary offering was sort of linked to education in some way, and educator practice. So I think that's a huge leap from 50 years ago where education was much more peripheral. So I just wanted to say that, and I just want to really think about, as we look to the future, how do we keep reimagining, re-envisioning, and bringing in folks that often are not included in academia and academic spaces into our work and our thinking. And I think the open access, articles that Ed, you've lobbied for with the, corporate publishing houses, that's hard to do. And thank you for doing that. And more open access publishing and getting more voices in the field is key.
Sure. Wonderful. We can each have a quick chance, if you allow us, and to just make a maybe response and build upon what's been shared. And I want to make a comment just building upon what Monisha has just shared about unsiloing. And so not only about unsiloing in the context of our field of peace education and how we define the borders and parameters of that, but also in these broader spaces, which I do think we've done a good job here. But nonetheless, I think we all know there's a perception problem that still remains. Education is considered to be the docile cousin in the family member of peace knowledge and peace research, right? So, but I think there could be nothing that could be further than the truth. Peace educators, we might not be the people who you see visibly standing and marching in the streets, but yeah, we are. We're doing that too, right? We're definitely doing that too. But in the presence of the spaces in which we're facilitating learning in classrooms and forms of popular education, we are the people who are the front lines of the resistance, right? And we're existing in dangerous spaces. We're confronting the colonial legacies that these institutions represent at risk to our own livelihood, at risk to our lives. Educators are the front lines of this work, and I want us to embrace that. And what that means to me in terms of desoloing is the importance of bringing different forms of peace knowledge into relation. I don't think we do a good enough job of bringing in the forms of knowledge that come from peace action that have been explored throughout this week into our preparation of educators. I'd love us to see teacher training programs incorporating principles of nonviolence, of ahimsa and satyagraha to prepare educators to exist in that struggle and in that space, which we know is really difficult space to be in. So I want us to be thinking about that as well as we go forward. By the way, I think that's what the founding members of this commission did. They did that really well. They channeled that action.
I have been focusing on, in terms of visions for peace education, on what I call micro-revolutions. I encounter students who are so overwhelmed in the classroom and they feel so tiny in the cosmos, which they should feel tiny because we are tiny. But we have so much potentiality to make change. So I've been focusing on micro-revolutions. I have been theorizing around decolonial peace and justice education as a way to really challenge the field. So I'm doing research right now for a country study and plan to write a book on that, and so we'll see how that comes up. I think peace education needs to interface more with artificial intelligence. We can't run from it, so how can we use that data justice, data ethics, et cetera, to promulgate peace? And I like to model radical creativity. I think that's needed more in the field, and so in that spirit, I will sing a small song for you. I've been underslept, so my voice might croak. Life gave me straw and I spun gold. I crawled in the world with a little light, darkness nipping at my heels. I almost drowned. I almost drowned, my voice almost fading. But I stared down God, I stared down the devil, and I chose love. I chose love.
So the recent editorial that I wrote in the Journal of Peace Education, the first one that I wrote was, it ended with harm less, love more. And intentionally chosen, harm less, love more. I think we need to complexify things, but sometimes simply choosing love, as Hakeem suggests in his song, can be powerful. I just wanted to say, Earth Care binds us all. Earth Care binds us all. Betty said it here, and it's been a little bit of the bandwagon that I've been riding for some time, that environmental realities, the climate crisis, circumscribe our ability to pass on a sustainable planet to future generations. And so, we work in different ways in different places, and yet Earth Care binds us all, and our human destiny is interwoven in relationships with one another and relationships with the earth. And so whatever we can do, in my humble opinion, to center the earth, its diversity, the human diversity on the planet, in regenerative ways to create a regenerative future, not only a sustainable future, but one that embraces pluralism and unity and justice. Earth Care binds us all.
Thank you, Palace, for that input on round 2. And so what we're going to do now is round 3 with you. And we're going to ask you to get into small groups. So I put up 2 prompts there, and I know there's not a lot of time to do this, but you're used to working in small spaces of time and this physical space too. Would you please get into the groups of say 3, 4, 5 at the most, and discuss with each other your answers to these prompts? And would somebody please write down and give to us afterwards, because we really, really want your input, your ideas on this. If anybody has, I'm sorry I don't have a smaller Google link, but if anybody can, well, how are you gonna get it to them? You're gonna. Okay, so Tony's gonna.
He'll type it in there.
Okay, Tony's gonna give you a smaller Google link. If you want to just put it in our Google document where these 2 prompts are. So please take until 10:30 in your groups and record your ideas. And if we have enough time afterwards, we're going to ask you to share one idea from your group. We'll just have to see if time allows. Okay, get in groups, please. Find somebody new to talk to. Go across the room. No more colleagues in the same class. Go switch sides of the room.
Candace, do you have, I had that shared. Yeah, you have to do those. Yeah. Running that down here. Do you want to check it now?
But then there's the problem.
I want to thank the groups that are writing the ideas down. Let's wrap it up in about 4 minutes and then share.
how do we work together? That's, yeah, so that's kind of, I think this thing,
Okay, everybody, would you stay in your groups, please, and come back together as a whole, but just stay together. You don't have to relocate. And let's share. Let's have a sharing time. I really appreciate those who were able to take some notes for us, because we really value your ideas. So I'm just going to get to each group, unless somebody else wants to carry this around. And we're going to share to the whole room, and if anybody could type these into the Google Doc, that would be wonderful. Okay, does any group want to start? Besides front group already shared. Any group want to start? Okay, I'll just pick a side of the room. Okay, this group is still very active, so who here would like to share? We're sharing out to the whole room. At least one idea that floated up, one idea, we have 10 groups, so one idea that floated up about, I guess our prompt left, but do you have it there? Okay, so one idea, please share it out to the room. Who's sharing?
We had the idea that peace education needs to go beyond people in the field of peace education. And therefore, it should maybe be, we should work towards having it as a required course in general education in universities is a good example. And then K through 12, I'm not sure where it would go, but it would be good to have a course there too.
Can I just add that I think it needs a better definition, at least a definition of where you start and how you approach it.
Thank you very much. You ready, Lester?
list of things. We started off with the need for intergenerational dialogue, and that led to the question of mentoring and also non-signing.
That's your honest.
No, I can read the whole, I'll post it.
That's the top of the list. We may come back to you if there's time. Okay, I lost where the groups are because you kind of repositioned. Okay, here's the group. Okay, who's willing to?
Thank you. So what we discussed was several things and will help me to summarize, but thank you. So first of all, climate emergency and ecological aspects can't be avoided when we think about peace education. Then we also discussed about participatory approaches, co-creation, embodiment, emotions, and being active and taking action. Then we ended up discussing about our positions, like we really need to recognize that we have a power within our institution, or if we don't have, and how we can give it to also the people we work with. What else? Building connections, rethinking not only ourselves, but rethinking also academia and publishing and being support and getting the support from also other people. I guess this summarizes what we had.
Alternative university, like in terms of research and action and learning experiments.
Did I miss a group right here? You were in Lester's group. Okay, I'm here and here. Okay, just to finish this side of the room. Were you in that group? You're your own group. All right, and you're in this group? There's a group back here. Forgive me, I wasn't sure where the sun was. Okay, who is it?
I mean, we discussed a lot of things, as I'm sure many of you did. We were speaking about aspects of inner peace, social justice, environmentalism, learning, unlearning, belonging, experiential learning. But I think the big question we had is, isn't it all education? In the sense of how can we actually center peace and justice and the environment in everything that we do? And that would be our vision, that it's not, again, re-centering the silo, but actually speaking about, well, if we are all educators in these fields, supporting inner peace, supporting environmentalism, justice, etc., how can we break it down to centering those themes within education more broadly?
Did you turn it off? No, okay. Let's see, and this is a group here.
I don't think I can summarize everything, but I'll try to highlight a few points. Brought out particularly from the youth member group. So we have two undergraduates who are here with us today. And there are points that they highlighted I find very pressing. One, the need to for youth to be involved. There's a sense of hopelessness among a lot of young people today. And how do we engender space that can help young people overcome this sense of hopelessness? And I hear it all the time around me. Silent quitting is a thing that has been very difficult recently. And so I thought that very important here. And the other was about accessibility. How to make the field more accessible and to overcome, as Manisha said, this neoliberalization of the field where people think twice about getting involved in something that doesn't have a job output. How is this going to help me after I graduate, become employed? And so finding the narrative to share, to make the field more approachable and impactful for young people, to challenge that neoliberalization. So those two came out, and what we asked in return was, what is it that makes young people feel that they want to be involved? Because we have two with us here today. So why did you come here? What inspired this action? Because you're doing precisely the opposite of the problem that we just raised. And what came out was this notion of mentoring, somebody said mentoring, less. Mentoring, but it wasn't expressed as mentoring, it was expressed as modeling. So we have educators around us who model the peace and the justice that we want to see in our communities. And that modeling is what I think Tony and Keem and others brought out around prefigurative education. The message that you're sharing is invoked in the method of how you're doing the education. And that you're making the personal political. And so what they said was they see it in the educators around them. And how can that not inspire you then to become involved as a peace educator if your educators are modeling that for you? So that's what we want to share from this group.
Thank you. Okay, is this a group over here?
Hello, everyone. Our group talked about accessibility again, and we were discussing about how we all came to the conference, and it was each of us, it was because we knew someone who was organizing what was happening here. And for myself, I don't think that I would be here unless I knew people who were involved with it. And we talked about connecting peace to opportunity, and there was a conversation about how military, you speak to that a little bit? I don't know.
I mean, just how soldiers, of how valored they are in American culture with an 80% approval rate, and there's no opportunity to suggest a different path than that. The baseball players, for a game wearing camouflage hats and socks. I mean, the message that, war is the answer and very little alternative being considered. So some alternative to that.
Thank you. And so thinking about how do you lower the barrier to entry to the conversation, and what does that look like? And for myself, I think about other organizations that I'm a part of that work in environmental spaces, and how there's the ability to connect globally with people who are doing work across the world in that space, and what would that look like for peace education, and how would people find out about it, and is the information only coming from journals, or does it exist in other spaces that are more accessible to people? Did I forget anything? Oh, and we also talked about limitations of rhetoric.
Is this a group?
Our group. So I'll just start off with one of our favorite things is we need more art. And we noted in here that we need to create more space for poolside beach, food, hiking scholarship, and to understand that dance, food, watering, celebratory art are legitimized forms of education and knowledge. I've had so many conversations in the pool and spa about scholarship, and that has been so important, especially over food. I just really want to name that we need to call it the whiteness in this space. So I just am finding it so difficult to hear of so many things of, I'll put it bluntly, the clutching of one's pearls, or the conversations that are having here are the US exceptionalism that is here too. So I think that is something that really needs to be addressed here. Also disability justice, queerness, really having frank conversations that we often see we're trying to catch up with the younger generation, but the tribal nations that we're studying or looking at have been talking about this for millennia, and who are we really catching up with? And I think that really stems back to that just radical self-acceptance of us and asking, are we the problem of the solution that we're trying to create? Anything else? Oh, Jamal.
Hey everybody, good morning. So yeah, we talked about a few things in our group. I think to Paul's point, we talked about peace education being accessible to marginalized communities, right? I think about my experience growing up in Philadelphia, and I feel like peace education feels really abstract, right? I think about the everyday violence people are subjected to because of systems of racism and white supremacy. And I feel like there's not being a link there between what peace education and pedagogy is offering as a solution, but also using that link to sort of really critically think about what's happening with the everyday experience of folks in inner city. And then also, to Paul's point as well, we talked about, like, who are we citing when we talk about peace education? And what voices are marginalized or on the peripheral as it relates to what is considered a peace education scholar, right? And it seems like there's so many definitions of what peace education is, but I'm thinking about what are those fugitive spaces within peace education that we're not considering or thinking about? And then lastly, we just offered a question around what are the ways in which peace education exacerbates what it's trying to dismantle?
City groups, I'm sorry, I passed you right up.
So we talked about opposition to the silencing of terms such as racism, interdisciplinarity, desiloing, and also the need to be relational, as isolation breeds violence, but community building breeds peace. Thank y'all.
Lester, I'm going to circle back to you because you gave your just my top statement. We have a couple minutes for you to do one. Did I miss a group over here? Okay, all right, I asked Lester and I'll take it to you.
We had this very long conversation, well, it's the same period of time, very dense. But I was taking notes, so I didn't get to add mine, so I'm gonna add mine now. I have this 3-step process I got from Gandhi, you know the guy. Listen, analyze, mobilize, which I make part of my teaching. That first you listen, and so we need more and more diverse voices in our curriculum. Analyze what holds up the system that we're trying to change, and then mobilize. How do we go about mobilizing? So I think some kind of action component is also part of our vision.
Thank you very much. Okay, and over here, and I think that's the last sharing.
I carry forward what Professor Lester has already mentioned. That comes in the dimension of positive peace teaching. So I, being a teacher for KG to PG, in my own scenario, for Eastern scenario, most of the points, if you look, it looks from a peace emerged from violence or a gun culture or that sort of a conflict. And this, if you come to the East, we do not have a gun culture in our classrooms, but we have other associative and relative emotive problems that are zoomed into the classroom because maybe caste system, not so much maybe economical marginal, my brother was expressing. Those are our issues that are running into the classrooms. Scholarship was one of the issues. See how those people who are at the grassroots level to be brought to the classroom itself is a challenge for us. Yesterday, Raju was telling. Even that being a challenge, getting into the intracurricular, we have been thinking, I've been working in the National Commission of ours, NCF 2020, it is already on process of coming to the framework. But then the challenges are much wider for us than only just that of economical, that of other than me, but for us internally also as a person to person relationship. These are to be a greater challenges to be, and to be, for us, it is, we cannot teach them as a separate education for peace, a separate entity. We have to have that intra-subject, intra-curricular, because we will be another time burdening our own teachers who are already burdened enough and more into the classrooms. And if we bring still more, after the post-COVID, our teachers are stressful more than ever before, just to mend the ways and behaviors of the children rather than just being their best teachers to them in the scenario. Because in these challenges of family conflicts, personal conflicts of the individual, I think I feel a positive approach, positive, we also call in positive psychology, positive peace is the concept that has to be stressed more than peace that is emerging from violence or conflict. Oh, of course, it is needed. Half of our world is in need of that. I do not deny, especially conflict-ridden places and this one, who cannot think of having classrooms within the so-called roof or within the sheltered roofs. They are in the open air because the situations are such. We are peaceful because our people are guarded and guided. And there are children, young children on the streets wanting to learn. Young children are every day hearing bombing sounds, maybe every day seeing the bloodshed, maybe every day have challenges of their own loved ones losing, maybe more than education. So where are we at this point of time? Who are we also? Yesterday I was, that also matters. So let our voices be stronger and stronger for a better world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we have heard from each group. And thank you, Manisha, for compiling notes. But those of you who have notes that you could give to me or send to me, my email address is ccarter, CCARTER, @peacemaker.st, Sam Tom. If you could send it to me, I'd appreciate that too, if you didn't get a chance to type into the Google Doc. So I appreciate everybody being here and all of the panel. And this is the 50th, actually it's 52 years now, since the founding of the Peace Education Commission. I want to honor all of the founders. Magnus Halsrud was with us earlier. I don't know if he is now. He was on the Zoom with the general meeting. And Christoph Wolf, those two founded it in the early 1970s. Christoph Wolf was already engaged and he's working very, very hard at another conference that came up before this one. He's highly publishing, he's in Berlin, he's still very involved in peace education. So thank you to our founders, thank you to all of you for being here and sharing your ideas and supporting us. And so we have just a closure of and celebration through music. The performing arts is so incredibly important to peace. I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Bajaj to close for us.
And thank you, Candice, for holding the space of peace education and all the founders and folks who've held this space for 50 years. I think the quote by Audre Lorde is, "Without community, there is no liberation," and we can't do this on our own. And having spaces to come together, feel in community, get that inspiration, go back to our work, newly re-energized and charged is so important. So happy birthday, Peace Education Commission. Do you want to bring a chair here? We're gonna have Edwin Martinez Callejas, who is a Jesuit priest from Colombia and a doctoral student at the University of San Francisco in international and multicultural education with a focus on human rights education, is gonna close us out with a celebratory song, just to celebrate 50 years. This is not, for institutions and commissions to last 50 years is a pretty amazing thing.
Me preguntaron cómo vivía, me preguntaron. Sobreviviendo, dije, sobreviviendo. Tengo un poema escrito más de 1000 veces y en él repito siempre que mientras alguien proponga muerte sobre esta tierra y se fabriquen armas para la guerra, yo pisaré sus campos sobreviviendo, todos frente al peligro sobreviviendo, tristes y errantes hombres sobreviviendo, 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 sobreviviendo. Hace tiempo no río como hace tiempo, y Y eso que yo leía como un jilguero, tengo cierta memoria que me lastima y no puedo olvidarme lo de Hiroshima. Cuánta tragedia sobre esta tierra. Hoy que quiero reírme apenas si puedo, ya no tengo la risa como un jilguero. Y la paz de los ríos del mes de enero, cuando por este mundo sobreviviendo, 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 sobreviviendo. Ya no quiero ser solo un sobreviviente. Quiero elegir el día para mi muerte. Tengo la carne roja sobre la sangre, la dentadura buena y mi espejo urgente. Quiero la vida de mis siguientes. No quiero ver un día manifestando por la paz en el mundo a los animales. Como me reiría ese loco día, ellos manifestándose por la vida y nosotros apenas sobreviviendo, sobreviviendo, sobreviviendo. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I do want to point out that our newly elected convener of the Peace Education Commission is in Colombia, and the newsletter editors, two of them are also in Colombia, so we can look forward. Her name, the new convener is Irene Giovanna, and she is going to be leading this group, the Peace Education Commission. And we're looking forward to having a newsletter in multiple languages too. So thank you, everybody. The food is out there. I think the buses to the closing celebration for this conference is at 11:30. Is that right, Hakeem? Okay, so you have time to grab a bite to eat. Thank you, everybody.
It's well done. 11 on the dot.
Thank you for being here. How many years? 20? Yeah. I feel like
Careful, I don't want to be tripped on this.
Hi.
Said
Yes.
something about an announcement about chickens to the airport, but he's disappeared. Who are you looking for?
Matt.
He's probably out there somewhere. Yeah.
Actually, it's funny because one of the reasons why I was determined to come was they would come.
Yeah.
But Jenny told me,
I said,
Jenny
I'm
told
trying
me
to bring
that
students. Are you all coming? And they're like, we've come for so many years,